to the MirrorFootball podcast. I'm Ian Cruz, and today I'm joined by a trio of Daily Mirror journalists, Chief football writer Martin Lipton, along with John Cross and Darren Lewis. In a minute, I'm going to ask the chaps to pick their 23-man England squads for the World Cup, but first we'll begin with a review of Wednesday night's match against Egypt. Much of the talk in the build-up to the game was about the reaction John Terry would expect, and there was certainly a bit of booing in the early stages. Martin, did you get the reception you expected?
Yes, to a degree. I think it was always going to be mixed. What was interesting was within sort of 5 or 10 minutes of the start, the fans who decided to turn up to boo John Terry realised he was actually England's best defender and just judged him on what he did. As a consequence, the longer it went on, the more support he got from the fans. That's right. I mean, it's gone on long enough. John Terry's behaviour has been reprehensible, some would say, repugnant, others would say, just what a footballer does, others might say. But he has to be judged now on what he does on the pitch. He's been tried and found guilty in the court of public opinion. He's lost the captaincy. That's it. Let him be an England player. He played very well. He was the best defender on the park by a million miles. He's probably our key defender. Let him be.
John, as Martin said, the booing did stop after maybe 10 or 15 minutes last night. Is that now finally the end of the matter here?
Well, I think the difference going forward now is that we're approaching the World Cup finals, and I think it's one thing to boo an England player and perhaps vent your spleen and frustrations at his behaviour in a friendly game. But looking forward, I think going into the World Cup finals, I find it hard to believe that England fans would boo and dissuade a player from playing well on the biggest stage of all, when obviously they want their country to do well. So I think that, and also the way that John Terry responded, I think he played extremely well. I mean, I like, Martin said before, I think that his behaviour isn't acceptable. It's not of a role model, and it's not of a football player should, set an example to society, really. So, but really, going beyond that, the fans had their say. He came through it. He played very well, and the booing subsided during the game. I think they've chosen to forgive and forget. So it's time to move on, I think, perhaps.
Right, well, clearly there's no question that John Terry will be part of Fabio Capello's squad for South Africa this summer. So let's pick those squads, guys. First of all, I'll ask you to read out your list of 23 names, please, and then we'll discuss. So let's start with you, Darren, please.
Okay, I've gone for 3 goalkeepers, obviously. David James, Robert Green and Joe Hart. Defenders, Leighton Baines, Ashley Cole, I'm sure he'll be fit by then. Rio Ferdinand, John Terry, Matthew Upson, Glenn Johnson and Wes Brown. Midfielders, I've gone for Stuart Downing, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Gareth Barry and James Milner. Also Michael Carrick, Aaron Lennon and Joe Cole. And up front, I've got Carlton Cole, Emil Heskey, Wayne Rooney, Jermaine Defoe and Peter Crouch.
Thanks, Darren. Going around the table, Martin?
I'm also going for a 7 defenders and 5 strikers split. Not sure that's what Capello's going to do. I think he'll go 8-8-4. But I would go Hart, Green, Foster as the keepers, Johnson, Ledley King, John Terry, Ferdinand, Jagielka, Cole and Baines. A midfield 8 of Lennon, Beckham, Gerrard, Lampard, Barry, Milner, Carrick and Joe Cole as a wildcard player. And 5 strikers, Rooney, Heskey, Defoe, Crouch. My 5th one is Gabriel Agbonlahor.
Okay, my 3 goalkeepers would be David James, Paul Robinson and Joe Hart. And then I'm going to go for 7 defenders, which are Glenn Johnson, I'm sure he'll be fit, John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, Ledley King, Matt Upson, Ashley Cole, Leighton Baines. And then my midfielders would be Theo Walcott, Aaron Lennon, Steven Gerrard, Gareth Barry, Frank Lampard, Michael Carrick, David Beckham, James Milner, who has that versatility, Joe Cole, and then my 4 strikers would be Wayne Rooney, Peter Crouch, Emil Heskey and Jermaine Defoe.
Before you carry on, am I allowed to change one already?
No, otherwise it defeats
or it defeats the object. John Potter's Padley. Right. You're like a naughty boy at school, you are. Real problem.
I want to change.
Right, well you can't, it's too late. You can't change when you're live on Sky Sports News with Mike Wedderburn and your big mates, can you? So you have to look. Poor old me, I have to keep you in check. Right.
All right, go on.
Right, well, very interesting right at the start there with the goalkeepers. Only 3 names each, obviously, which is all Capello will take. And and no uniformity there. I mean, John, interestingly, the suggestion from Capello last night seems to be that Rob Green is now his number one, and you've not got him in your squad at all.
I don't fancy him. I don't think he's. I just don't think he commands his penalty box at all well. I think my breakup of goalkeepers is David James would be my first choice. I think Paul Robinson would be the experienced backup. I think he's been there in major tournaments before. I think Joe Hart is the one for the future. I just don't. Rob Green, I just don't think he's. For example, I do not think that he is a Champions League goalkeeper. I mean, you can argue that David James isn't because he's playing for Portsmouth at the moment, but he has that experience. He's big, he's commanding, I just think he's an excellent goalkeeper all round.
Darren, I know you're a big David James fan, aren't you?
Yeah, bigger, stronger, more athletic, better shot stopper than Robert Green. And I tend to agree across you, really. James has got that big game experience. He's been with big clubs, he's played with big players, and Robert Green hasn't. And I'm not really sure I necessarily agree when you say that the indication from last night was that because he's picked Green's going to be his number one. I think the side that plays the first match of the World Cup could be very different from the side that we saw last night. And I think James will definitely be in it.
Okay, well, interestingly, I mean, Martin, you've left James out altogether, and your three goalkeepers are Joe Hart, Rob Green and Ben Foster. Not a lot of experience there.
No, I accept that. James is 40. We paid the price of sending old goalkeepers to tournaments. 2002, David Seaman was too old. I'm afraid I have the same problem with David James. David James has been a great goalkeeper for club. He's never been a great goalkeeper for England. He failed under pressure in 2004. I think he'll be flaky again under pressure. The problem we have is that none of them are good enough. You can pick 5 goalkeepers in the Premier League, all of whom are better than any of England's 3 goalkeepers. Rayner, Gomez, Van der Sar, Schwarzer, Howard. All of those are better than any of the keepers we've got.
You're probably right there, but I think you're being a bit harsh as far as James is concerned. I mean, he was brilliant on the way to Portsmouth winning the FA Cup last year. I mean, 2008. I seem to remember Man United battering Portsmouth and him being a fantastic last line of defence in that match. I think it was the semi-finals.
Doesn't make a summer.
Well, indeed, but I'm just saying that he's a very different player to the player that, for example, he keeps himself in far better condition than David Seaman did. When you consider his age,
I don't think he's too old. I just think he's too
David
old.
Seaman was a completely different keeper.
Look, I can understand the argument. I think James will go, but it's not about who I think. I think the 3 will be the 3 that were in the squad last night. But it's not about who I think will go, it's about who I think should go. In my opinion, I would leave David James out. And that's not just because I've got a bet with someone else, £100. I mean, I actually think I would leave him out. I personally would.
I'm just, I'm staggered by that. I just think that James is most experienced and, I think he's our best goalkeeper, really, at the moment. I think Paul Robinson, it's funny, actually, I twittered during the game last night when I saw Paul Robinson in the TV studio. And Blackburn Rovers fans swamped me with tweets saying that he's been unbelievable this season, but he's unfashionable.
Even down there, where he can't dive? You know it, I know it. He can't dive to his right.
Rob Green,
right.
Too many weaknesses to list, I'm afraid. So I think, that's perfect for me. I think James is still, at the moment, first choice, but he's got a little bit to do. Obviously, he needs to be playing regularly, but if he does that, for me, he gets the nod.
Well, we talked about potential weaknesses there. I mean, Darren, you said you think the team that played last night will be very different to the one that starts against the United States on June the 12th. And I think most people would suggest that probably 3 out of that back 4 who played last night wouldn't be in the first choice team, with the exception of John Terry, obviously. Some names here as backup central defenders. John, you've picked Ledley King, Matthew Upson. Martin, you've got Phil Jagielka in there, which is very interesting. Ledley King also. Darren, you've got Upson, you've got Glenn Johnson. The question marks about his fitness as well. Where's Brown? I mean, are we saying here that if there are clearly question marks about John Terry, possibly answered last night, Rio Ferdinand's fitness, those 2 are absolutely key, Martin, are they not?
Without question. The reason I picked King is because he only has to play 2 games in the tournament. If Ledley King goes, he plays the 3rd group game and he plays the semi-final. The 3rd group game to save someone from a suspension in the knockout, and the semi-final because somebody is suspended for the semi-final. That's why I have him, because Ledley King is the best defender in English football, in my opinion, in most people's opinion, I think. He's a better defender than John Terry. He's a better defender than Rio Ferdinand, but he can't train. He can't therefore play every game because he can't play 2 games in a week. So therefore, you take him. It's a gamble, but I take him because he's our best defender for those 2 games. I also think that the England back 4 picks itself in terms of the first choice. It will be Johnson, Ferdinand, Terry, Cole. Any injuries, and we're in trouble.
It's an interesting call there with Ledley King, because obviously you're absolutely right. He can only play, maybe 1 game a week, 1 game every 10 days. If he goes, and that master plan that Martin set out there sounds perfect, but if either Terry or Ferdinand falls over injured in the first game against the States, and suddenly Ledley's got to play 2 games in a week, Darren, that's a problem.
Yeah, but I don't think that will happen. I think, first of all, I think we should get through the group comfortably. I know that might be a big thing to say, because the United States are a very, very accomplished side. But of the other 2, I mean, Slovakia, I think they beat Qatar on Wednesday night, but I wouldn't look at Slovenia and say that they would pose any problems for us. And that's the reason why I don't think we would need King to play 2 games in a week. I actually, bizarrely enough, although King's not in my squad, he's the one that I did wrestle with, because I can see every argument for taking King, and I do agree. If he's fit and he's playing regularly, he is the best defender in English football.
But also, he won't go. He won't be in the squad. He should be in the squad, but I don't believe he will be in the squad.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some talk about him this week, but it's unlikely that he'll be taken.
It was interesting that certain players that none of us have named will not be in the squad. Other players who none of us have named will be in the squad. In my opinion, I guess, from what I hear from what Capello said. But it's about what we think he should do. What I would say is that he's probably a better judge than some of us are.
I just feel that some of the players that he's called upon are just, Phil Jagielka,
but I like him. I like him because
each to their own. Up against Spain, he was found
right left balance. That's why.
And then I think Ryan Shawcross, for example, and then I'm not sure he's England class. And then sort of Gary Cahill has been a regular in the squads. Ledley King. That's why Ledley King gets my vote, because he's pure class. And then called upon, on occasion he could do the job on the big stage, but. I think the problem with Ledley is obviously the fitness issue means that sometimes he goes into games well below his best, like at Arsenal at the Emirates this season. God, he was horribly exposed, frankly. And yet we know that, it's only going to be a case of dipping in and out. And my fear is that if John Terry or Rio Ferdinand miss a game, the backup is just not going to be good enough. That's why Ledley gets in my squad.
I don't think there's too many arguments with that, John. I'm moving into the midfield. I'm going to stick with you here, John. Both Martin and Darren have picked 8 midfielders and 5 strikers. You've gone 9 midfielders and 4 strikers. We'll come on to the strikers and your reason for that in a moment. But you're the only one of the 3 who's picked Theo Walcott in his preferred squad. Now, he didn't have a great game last night when perhaps it was his chance to prove he's back to something approaching his best. But you'd still take him?
Yeah, I would, really. I do feel he's got that potential. Don't get me wrong, from here until, when the squad is actually finalised, he's got to do some work, he's got to put in some consistent performances, but I feel if he does that, then he gets my nod. He gets my nod because he's his pace, he can take people on, he's exciting, he's done it on the big occasion, don't forget Zagreb, that was a huge night, to score a hat-trick in those circumstances up against that sort of expectation is really quite exceptional. It does also offer you something from the bench, as almost an emergency striker on occasion. He could play through the middle if called upon, and I think he just offers something a little bit different. The makeup of my midfielders, I think I've got 9 in there, but it also carries then James Milner, because I've one defender lighter, because Milner could, in an emergency, play at right back. And yet he gives you that versatility. I think sometimes in naming a squad, you've got to take a few risks. And I think, that sort of breakup of my squad is a bit of a gamble. But to win a World Cup, sometimes your gambles have got to come off for you.
Well, you've all gone for Michael Carrick, which is interesting because I think probably before last night, he wouldn't have got in many people's lists. He's not been one of Capello's fancies. Martin obviously had a very good game. He came on at half-time last night. Along with Crouch, probably changed the game. Did that 45 minutes do enough for you, for him to go?
It confirmed my view. Were Owen Hargreaves to be fit, Michael Carrick would not be in my squad. were Owen Hargreaves to be fit, Michael Carrick would not be in Fabio Capello's squad. But Owen Hargreaves will not be fit. So therefore, Carrick had the opportunity last night to stake a claim. And for the first time in 15 months, he actually did it. I think he looked to play, he came on. Now, admittedly, Frank was off the pace, but Carrick, in a better system for England, because England can't play through the middle. We win the ball high, or we play it long. We don't pass through the middle. It's not what England do. Carrick gave balance. He allowed Barry to be a better player. It worked. He played well. And I think that, Michael's a nice lad. I think sometimes he's too soft. He lacks the intensity you need on the pitch. And off the pitch as well. He's a nice lad, but you sometimes think he's a bit fey and lacks a bit of the nastiness you need to be a football player, actually. But he can play, he can pass. And I think he should be. I think we all picked Joe Cole. Oh, we wouldn't have bet £2 of Darren's money that Joe Cole is not in the World Cup squad. I think he should be. I would have him in, but I don't think he will be.
There are lots of. He's another player with question marks about his fitness and has he got time to rediscover that form? I mean, again, both John and Martin have picked a currently unfit Aaron Lennon in their final squad. Darren, you've left him out and you've picked Sean Wright-Phillips, who the other two left out. I mean, have you picked Sean Wright-Phillips based on the fact that Lennon's been injured or on what he did in his little cameo against Egypt on Wednesday night?
I picked him on the basis that he can play on both sides. I don't think Lennon's as effective on the left side as he is. I've followed Spurs around for a couple of European seasons. I've seen him against some good teams around Europe, and he's nowhere near as effective on the left as he is on the right, whereas Wright-Phillips can be. And he also has that capacity to run at defenders that proved so decisive on Wednesday night. Joe Cole, I tend to agree with Martin that he's not playing anywhere near regularly enough for Chelsea. It looks very much as though they're going to cast him overboard at the end of the season on a free transfer. And that could actually kill his hopes of going to the World Cup because, as we know, Capello will only pick players who are playing regularly for their clubs. Carrick, just on that, I think Manchester United have made him a much, much better player than he was at Spurs. There's a fantastic economy to his passing, but also an intelligence to his passing as well. And he can also have a dip from 25, 30 yards as well. And you could see the difference, the marked difference between the first half of Wednesday. I don't think I picked him on the basis of Wednesday night's game. I mean, Carrick has played in some big games against some top opposition and really done the business over the last couple of seasons.
I so agree with that. I think it would be unthinkable not to take Michael Carrick. Simply because Darren's so right, he came on and made such a difference last night. He's the unsung hero of the Manchester United midfield. He is the most.
Who can see that pass.
Absolutely, but also he is the most successful English midfielder, if you like, over the last 3 years. It's astonishing, and yet he's still regarded as a kind of an England fringe player.
Well,
I think he deserves.
He played 20 games.
Well, I think he deserves more. He deserves.
Possibly so.
He deserves more respect than that. He can come on and change a game. So that's why you're looking for players who can actually affect a game to be in your squad and the complete makeup of the squad. Would he start in South Africa the first game? No. But he's got a valuable member of the squad because he could partner.
Do you know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Gilberto. I remember when Arsenal signed Gilberto, and many people said, who was he? And not many people realised he was a member of the Brazil World Cup winning side. But he was just such an unsung hero. He did the dirty work that all the flair players didn't do.
has real talent and real ability and is an important player. I just think what he's lacked in the past too often is the willingness to actually take command of a situation, particularly in an England shirt. He himself admitted at the start of this season the reason he hasn't played enough for England is because of him, because he hasn't demanded, he hasn't dominated, he hasn't shown he deserves to be there. And again, even this season,
say that in the last 3 seasons he's won the title twice. Was it twice or 3 times?
3 times.
3 times, sorry. And the Champions League.
Absolutely.
So how has he not shown that he can actually dominate a situation?
You would think he would be the perfect Fabio Capello footballer, because obviously his Italian background quite clearly the ball is king. Looking after the ball is key to the way Capello wants England to play, and there's no one better in England looking after the ball than Michael Carrick, surely.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he's fantastic. If it was a contest to put your medals on the table, Michael Carrick wins in that midfield.
Absolutely,
absolutely fantastic.
Okay, well, moving on to
before you do move on, I just want to. I mean, I've got Downing in there because I think that we might need to get somebody who can actually get to the byline and get a ball over.
England played down the right, not the left.
Well, yeah, but there are two flanks.
But England under Capello play down the right, not the left.
So you think that having Steven Gerrard on the left side of midfield,
That's the
right-footed
way he's going to
midfielder,
work it.
but there's a big split between you're trying to predict the way he's going to work it and your squad. Which of them are you putting across here?
Look, my view is we need pace down the right. We don't have to be pace down both flanks. We need pace down the right. It works for England. Downing has never done it enough for me, in my opinion. It's interesting that the Wright Phillips situation. Personally, I wouldn't go near him. I've got a personal thing about Wright Phillips.
What is that?
I just don't like him.
Well, that's not really a basis.
No, I don't like him as a bloke. I don't like him as a player. I think he lets you down far too often.
What's he done to you as a bloke?
I just don't like him. Personally, I just don't like him.
If you're listening, Sean, Martin Lipton's going on.
I don't like him. But
Okay. We can fix you up with a drink maybe for our friends across the ocean.
But I thought yesterday, as he has done the last couple of times I've seen him, he was really impressive.
So let me get this right. You would risk the hopes of the nation because you don't like a player.
There's nothing wrong with personal animus. And when it comes to Sean,
Well, in that case, then you should have John Terry in your squad. Because
Absolutely.
Because if you let personal,
grudges and
have an influence.
I haven't got a grudge with John Terry. I just don't like Sean. But I would say, I think Wright Phillips will be in the squad. Because I think he's actually proved in the last few games, he's scored more goals for England this season than Wayne Rooney, which is remarkable but true.
he scored the first goal of Fabio Capello's reign. It's like
The second goal, because the winning goal against Switzerland.
The winning goal against Switzerland.
Jermaine Jones scored the goal. Personally, I don't like him, but I think he'll be in the squad.
But the thing is,
remarkable.
well, it is.
Right,
But I just want to make this very quick point. I think when you're picking a squad, you need that imagination, but you need versatility as well, and that's why you can. Like we said before, Milner can play as a defender as well as a midfielder. I can see why you pick Walcott. He can play as a deep line striker, but he can also play as a winger as well. And I think you've got to have Sean Wright Phillips in there because he can play on either wing. If we've got a rigidity in the squad, then when we come up against teams like Brazil, like Spain, that can interchange positions, we are going to be left floundering. And that's why you've got to have him in there.
Right, well, let's move on to the strikers. And all four of you have gone for Wayne Rooney, Emil Heskey, Jermaine Defoe, and Peter Crouch. I'm glad to see, because I think we'd all agree he's probably one of the nicest men in football. Martin, I'm sure even you like Crouchy.
No, I do like Crouchy. He's lovely.
The debate here, internally between the three of you, seems to be 4 strikers for John, 5 for Martin and Darren, which is personally the camp I would be in. But we've said before, we're pretty certain those 4 will go. The difference between your two fifth man, Martin, you've gone for Gabio Bonlahor, Darren, Carlton Cole. Martin, do you want
Small and quick rather than another big man. Cole hasn't done it enough when he's played. He's had his chances, not taken them. Frustrated Capello as well. And Bonlahor, I don't think will go, but I think he's got something about him. I don't know quite what it is, but there's something about him as a player that I think could be an interesting player.
Well, he's got that raw pace, which terrifies people.
And we had Vassell in 2002, who had pace and not much else. But
pace and not a lot else, I think we'd all agree. Yeah, I mean, Darren, Carlton Cole?
Well, Carlton Cole fits into that system. It's funny, even after that whole qualifying campaign where Capello had a big man up front, not necessarily to score lots of goals, but for other people to run off him and score goals, was still persisting with this idea that you need a prolific out-and-out front man. And Capello's not bothered by that in the slightest.
Heskey plays, Heskey starts, Heskey, any goal is a bonus.
It's like, I mean, Heskey scored, 6 goals in a calendar year in the last, over the last...
Oh, but they were great goals.
But my point being, he's not prolific, but he works for Capello. And so on that basis, you've got to get Cole in there because, again, he's a big man. He's learned to hold the ball up. So
You've got 3 of them then. You've got 3 of them who do the same job.
Well, yeah, indeed. But, you look at Crouch. Crouch came in against Egypt and he was just as good on the deck as he was. But I don't particularly think he's brilliant in the air. But you'd have those big men in the squad ahead of Agbonlahor because although Agbonlahor's quick, he's not, for me, international class. And I think if you have a small, quick man, he's got to have that composure in front of goal. That's going to be the difference between getting picking
Michael Owen then?
Well, no, I wouldn't pick Michael Owen because he's an injury risk. He scored the other day and then in the second... That game, the Carling Cup final, summed up the trouble with Michael Owen. Great goal, but you can't rely on him to even finish a game, let alone a tournament. And so you wouldn't pick him, but you would pick Defoe because Defoe can get goals out of nothing. Rooney 2, and the other 3 are the big men, the kind of big men that Fabio Capello likes.
Yeah, I think there was a problem for Jermaine Defoe against Egypt, simply because I think he his last 2 games against for Tottenham, he was struggling a little bit with a hamstring injury, and I don't really feel we've given the opportunity to do himself proper justice against Egypt. I think he actually had a great crack at perhaps being a contender to start against with Wayne Rooney. Unfortunately, I don't think he was able to take full advantage of that opportunity given to him, because he wasn't at his sharpest, wasn't at his fittest, and unfortunately I think maybe the tide has gone against him. But 100% in your squad, because at the very least he comes off the bench in every game and potentially scores. Absolutely, he's a great finisher. He's really improved his all-round game in the last year or so with Spurs, and I think that's a major bonus as well. But I think Carlton Cole, I think he's a real one for the future. But for me, it's Emile Heskey this time. After these finals, I think Emile Heskey drops out, and then Carlton Cole becomes the new Emile Heskey, if you like.
You picked 4 strikers. I remember 2006, where we effectively ran out of strikers.
No strikers.
Don't you think there's a danger of that this time round?
Well, I do that simply because, and I know it's a special position, because I just feel that you've got attacking options in amongst the midfielders. You've got
Walcott,
Lennon,
Gerrard, haven't you?
Lampard. Yeah.
There are attacking threats
in
in
different
midfield.
way, and also Joe Cole, who can obviously, maybe play as a support striker in an emergency. But I don't really think it would come to that, because I think the strikers would give you enough options in there. For me, Crouchy has given himself so much of a real chance with his performance, and also his goal record for England is absolutely sensational.
It's a record you simply can't argue, isn't it? The numbers don't lie. 20 goals in 37 games is an extraordinary statistic. So, well, anyway, there are still clearly some questions for Fabio to answer, and he'll be earning a big chunk of that £6 million annual salary in the next couple of months. I'm just going to move briefly on to domestic issues for a few minutes before we finish. And it's the FA Cup quarter-finals this weekend, but it really doesn't seem to have caught the public's imagination. I mean, Darren, we all moan when it's the same old big teams in the last 8 of the competitions, but here we are with a few underdogs. We've got the likes of Reading, Portsmouth, Fulham in the quarter-finals. Still, people don't seem that interested, but clearly we can't have it both ways, can we?
Well, I think the FA Cup suffered in comparison to the Carling Cup. I mean, John's written a good piece on the MirrorFootball website about how to change the FA Cup, and you were talking, John, if I may, about the fact that you could do away with replays, go straight to penalties. I think the Carling Cup has had a lot of that excitement because of that format. I think it's had better ties. I think the ties in the last couple of rounds of the FA Cup have been abysmal and just not caught the imagination. I'd go a stage further. I think one of the respondees to your piece said that they would just give a Champions League place to the FA Cup winners. I don't know if there are logistical problems with that. I'm sure Martin will tell us.
Yeah,
exactly.
But and they'll say no.
They would say, but I think that could be a way of sexying up the FA Cup. But I definitely think that the FA Cup has really suffered. But if I may just say, I would be absolutely over the moon if Portsmouth were to go and win it. We talk about the romance of the Cup. Against all the odds, that team have really given 100%. I've seen them many times this season, and they really do look aside. The club's going to the wall. The players are not getting paid, yet they go out there and they give their. And I know some people say don't shed too many tears. They're still earning a few £1,000s a week or whatever. But the fact is that that club is a mess. It would be a real fairy story if they were to go on and win the FA Cup.
John, Darren alluded to the piece you wrote on the website earlier in the week, and one of your suggestions was to keep the big clubs apart until, I think it was the 5th round. That would obviously give the smaller clubs more opportunity to reach the final 16.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you could look at it 2 ways. I think the smaller clubs are bound to get upset about that and perhaps say, it's less opportunity. But I actually think it would provide more opportunity, really. Because it would bring back the romance that I think they, on many occasions, I think teams from, say, for example, the lower reaches of the Championship or League One or League Two realise that they're not going to, win the FA Cup, but, they could enjoy a money-spinning tie. And if they were sort of, given that opportunity, then more power to their elbow. I do think the FA Cup has just fallen away, it just needs a little bit of an injection, some new excitement. I think it's real, it's a real shame. It needs a bit of a lift, and this season is sort of, when you see live TV games, which obviously has a knock-on effect as well, but you see the empty stands there, blimey. I mean, how many times do Bolton, for example, in the last round, host Tottenham in the 5th round? They've got an opportunity to go to the 6th round, and the place is half empty. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the FA Cup needs to address it. Clubs need to address it. And it's just, I'll tell you what, I went to the replay actually, and I think there was 150 Bolton fans there at White Hart Lane. It's ridiculous. And the competition is dying on its feet, and yet the Carling Cup, for whatever reason, seems to have enjoyed a bit of a renaissance. And I think the Football League have been sort of forward-thinking, and I think now the FA, they're trying to address issues, and fair play to them for that. But I would like to see one-off games, go to a penalty shootout, maybe midweek. It makes it, I don't know why, but it makes it more exciting.
Night games always have more buzz about them.
Absolutely. And I just think it'd be great. It'd be the shot in the arm the competition needs. And, I know we've got this tradition and replays and it's everything, but we don't have replays in semis of the final now. So why do we have them in the other rounds? It makes a nonsense of the competition there.
Martin, the last word on this season's FA Cup competition goes to you. I mean, like I said, it's quarterfinals this weekend. I mean, is it now a question of simply, can anyone stop Chelsea winning it?
Oh, I hope so. Oh, dear, we all hope so, don't we? They're odds-on favourites.
Sean Phillips
They should win the competition, but they should have won it a couple of years ago and they lost to Barnsley, so anything's possible. I'd love to see, as a romantic, Portsmouth, Fulham, Stoke and Reading in the semi-final. But can you imagine what the audience figures would be like if those were the 4 semi-finalists? 2 men and a dog, and the dog's gone home. You actually need Spurs, Chelsea, Villa to win to get anyone interested in it.
It comes back to the original point. Everybody moans it's the same clubs that win everything, but when they're not in the quarterfinals, semi-finals, no one's interested.
It's like golf without Tiger Woods. No one wants to turn on. You need the big guns. You need to have the big team. So actually, Chelsea versus Spurs final would probably be the best final they could have now because people will be interested in watching that. And even John might think about supporting Spurs for 20 minutes, half an hour.
Do you think the pressure might get to Chelsea? I mean, everyone, as you rightly say, everyone now expects them to go and win it. Could that be their undoing?
I think if it gets to the semi and they're still in the Champions League and they're a point behind Arsenal or United, maybe Arsenal actually, in the title race, and that's really more important, that they might just switch off for that game at Wembley. You never know. And that might make whoever they play in the semi, you've got to fancy them to beat Stoke, give them a chance. But if they turn up and play, they win because they're the best team by a million miles left in the competition.
Just one other thing, sorry to interrupt, but would you, John was saying about you would give, do away with the replays, did you say? What would you do to change the FA Cup?
I still like the FA Cup. I still love the FA Cup more. I don't have an emotional attachment to the League Cup. I never have had. The FA Cup means it's that first Saturday in January, which still has a buzz for me. I remember being a kid. It was the most exciting weekend of the season, apart from the first game of the season, and the cup final meant so much. There's nothing wrong with the FA Cup that a few good ties in the draw, which is random chance, wouldn't make better. And I think it's still a great competition, and we've all grown up with it, and I still love it, and I don't care. I actually love Cup Final Day. I think it's a brilliant day.
And that does go back to what you said, Darren. The Carling Cup's benefited from some great ties this year, so maybe next year it'll be the FA Cup's turn. We will wait and see. I did like John's ideas, though, and anyone who's not seen those ideas, take a look at mirrorfootball.co.uk/opinion, and you can read what John, Darren and Martin have had to say on the big issues of this week. Finally this week, I also want to draw your attention to Mirror Football's Baldy 11 that we'll be running on the website on Friday. This came about after we noticed how bald Wayne Rooney is going. Obviously, he's been a lot made of his headed prowess this year, and I did see an interview with him on the BBC last week. We were talking about the extra patch at the front there, and clearly it's having an effect. Now we want you to nominate your favourite slaphead footballers, and we'll build the best 1 to 11 baldy team. So tweet your messages to @MirrorFootball or search for MirrorFootball on Facebook and leave your nominations there. So the chaps around the table here, a bit of light relief to end with this week. John, who's the best baldy footballer of all time?
Well, I wouldn't say who's the best technically gifted, but someone who's wholehearted
commitment absolutely summed up, I think, just a fantastic era for the club. And, I enjoyed watching him and him flying into tackles. He was hard as nails and still works for the club. He's a great ambassador. He'll be a great coach in the future. Steve Bold from Arsenal.
Very good shout. Darren?
Well, I've taken a shine to.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's here all week.
No, to be fair, everybody knows how great this player is. He slapped a couple in the World Cup final against France, and he is probably one of the greatest players I've ever seen. Probably we'll see Zinedine Zidane.
And Martin?
Couple for me, actually. One going back to the 70s, Johnny Method.
Oh.
And one going back to the 90s, he was a fantastic player for an unexpected team in the 94 World Cup, which is Jordan Lechkov of Bulgaria, who was fantastic.
Do you remember the BBC actually they had a shot. They realised that every so often, in some matches he'd be bald, in some matches he'd have a full head of hair, and they realised that he had one of those strips of hair that he selectively put on for certain matches. And he had a wig, yeah, and then he had a split screen. They showed him in one group game. He was bald as a coot.
I'll tell you what, I swear this is true. A stupid anecdote. There I was on the train station one morning, and train comes in at great rate of knots, probably too fast, rush hour train, and the guy's on the edge of the platform. He's just leaning forward ever so slightly. Train rushes past, blows his wig off. The bloke, as cool as a cucumber, proceeds to get on the train, leaving his wig on the tracks. And I just wonder how on earth he faced his workmates that morning. Hair today, gone tomorrow.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much for that, John. Well, Capello's told us there'll be no wags at the World Cup this year, but look out for the wigs. Right. Thank you very much, Darren, Martin and John. A pleasure to have your company as always. And join us next week for more from the Mirror Football podcast team.